Hey everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show. My name is Tom Marks, assistant editor here at PC Gamer. With me today is Evan Lottie, our editor-in-chief. How you doing, Evan?
Great. Glad to be back, Tom.
Yeah, and joining us via the future screen technology is a newcomer to the show, Steven Mesner, freelance writer for us at PC Gamer. How you doing, Steven?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. If you guys have been frequent readers of the site, especially last week, you'll have seen Steven's name pop up quite a bit lately, especially in our GDC coverage, which is why we're glad to have him on for this show, because we'll be talking about a lot of our favorite things from GDC. We saw a whole ton of stuff last week at the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, and there's just a lot of great stuff to talk about of what's coming and talking about retrospectives and stuff like that.
Yeah, GDC doesn't really have a lot of hype as a consumer show because it's not E3, it's not PAX, it is a game developers conference, but rest assured we saw some cool stuff we can talk about, especially VR stuff that's kind of exclusive and interesting. So look forward to that.
Yeah, and then we'll also be discussing, Evan and I got a chance to play Paragon in the early access of Paragon. That's Epic's new MOBA shootery thing. Evan is going thumbs down already. But a lot of you guys in Twitch chat, at least, have been asking us about that game basically every week in the Twitch chat Q&A since it was announced. So we're going to actually dive into what we thought of that later. We'll also be talking about cross-platform play. That's between a PS4, Xbox, PC, all those people playing in merry harmony together, and how we feel about
Impossible.
Depends on the game, I guess, but we'll get into that a little bit later. And then finally, we'll be finishing up with your questions from Twitch chat. But first, let's start the show, as we always do, talking about what we've been playing lately. I'm going to switch things up and actually go first this week.
Great.
I always leave myself for the end, but this time, I have a fun story. So the last couple of weeks, I've been jumping between kind of a lot of big time-consuming games like Stardew Valley, and I've been trying to get into all these other smaller things like Paragon. I want to try Paragon. I've just got access to Battleborn, and I want to keep trying that. And there's a lot of different things I've been jumping between. But this week I found myself really falling back into Overwatch, which I hadn't played for weeks at this point. And they just patched yesterday. They added a big patch. They added a new game mode. They added a new map. They did a ton of rebalances, including pretty severely nerfing one of the characters I was using, Zenyatta. But my story has actually nothing to do with the gameplay of Overwatch, which everyone who's not in the beta will be happy to hear. But I was playing a match the other weekend. Last weekend? I think it was last weekend. And at the very beginning of the match, I'm on Lucio, who's like the sound guy, right? And
sound guy.
It's kind of the best.
He's
way
like
to
the
describe
audio guy behind our podcast. He's like handling the levels for the rest of the team.
Yeah.
It's funny. We just published an article this week about like the sound design of Overwatch. So he's just the guy in the background being like, "Yo, turn up the mid, get the bass going. It's way too low. Your levels."
I mean,
That's why he kills people. He gets the bass so loud that it like throbs their hearts out of their chest.
oh god, that just got graphic.
Sorry.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, but I'm on Lucio. I go up against this McCree, who's the Western guy, because everyone can be described in one word, apparently.
Yeah, that's fine.
And as Lucio has the ability to like knock people back, kind of like the Pyro's right click in TF2, and I use that to knock the McCree off a ledge right as he kills me. Okay, like same time. So we both kill each other in the same second. And I see the name pop up, and I'm like, wait, I know that username. And my brain starts like running. Like literally every time I'm dead in the match, I'm like, where do I know that username? I'm checking my Steam friends list. I'm checking my Battle.net friends list. I'm checking everywhere because I'm like, I absolutely know that somewhere. And the game was a stomp. We won in like 5 minutes. And at the end of the game, I type in all chat. I'm like, hey, is that a really common IGN, or like, do I know you? And they just don't respond. And I'm like, crap. And I get re-queued into a different game, so I'm not there with them anymore. And I get a friend request. And I accept the friend request, and I get a message about 10 seconds later that just says, is this Tom Marks? And I realize it's my friend from high school who a decade ago we played games together like all the time in high school, and really close friends, kind of lost touch in college when we both went to different colleges and that sort of thing. And we hadn't talked probably I think we haven't talked in 4 or 5 years. and I recognized his username. He recognized my username, and we found each other in a game of Overwatch, which makes it crazier to me because that beta is like dinky. Like there's nobody in it, yet I found a high school friend from a decade later in it.
Man.
It was just great. It was like this magical moment.
When is the last time you had spoken to them?
I think it was like 2012. Like it's been a while. And we
Okay.
used to be close friends, right? Like it's now it's this funny thing because I sent him a message and I was on Facebook and I was like, yo, we got to play some Overwatch together. And like he was like, yeah, definitely. And then I see him later that night on BattleNet playing Heroes of the Storm and I'm like, we also got to play Heroes of the Storm together. Like this is great.
Yeah, those moments of serendipity, and that seems like a really extreme one, are pretty special. I mean, you'll always have those moments. I mean, especially if you're playing like server-based matchmaking games where like you just run into the same person like a week later and you remember them because you had like a little moment of rivalry with them, and it's cool how games can promote those moments of fun. I mean, it's like, you know, having like a neighborhood basketball court and you run into the same guy a month later or something, and he dunks on you.
Yeah, it was just magical. It really was. And it was great too because we like that moment where the first time we saw each other in game was a stalemate, right? We killed each other and then both probably had a moment of like, that's a funny username. Like it was just really good.
It's amazing.
So that's my long-winded weird friendship story of Overwatch. Evan, what have you been playing lately?
That's hard to beat. Yeah.
That's why I wanted to go first.
Yeah. We'll be talking about it later. I played a little bit of Paragon with the gang here. It was good to get everybody together in a game that is actually a little bit rare for us, partly because our tastes are a little disparate. I don't play Hearthstone. Some of our guys here play Hearthstone. I play fewer MOBAs. You know, I and a couple of us play shooters, but not everybody. So it's nice to have that like full kind of Venn diagram overlap for an afternoon at least. I continue to play Darkest Dungeon. The game kind of just allows you to play it forever. In a variety of ways where, I mean, you really have to, it's a game of attrition, right? I mean, if you're not familiar with Darkest Dungeon, it's like a campaign-style game, roguelike, where you're managing a party of characters in this Lovecraftian town, and you take them out into different dungeons. They die, they get afflicted by stress and other, like, mental conditions that you have to deal with. And they level up, and you bring treasure back home. But basically, if you're not being aggressive enough, if you're not taking risks, you can actually sort of, like, your progression can kind of creep backward because as you bring your characters out into these dungeons, they get diseased, they get stressed, and you have to like pay resources to negate that stuff or just like dismiss those characters altogether and then build new characters. So yeah, having a great time with that. It's turned out to be like a surprisingly relaxing game for me. Like I just kind of grind away. I put in a couple dungeons a night or something and I accumulate some steady progress. And I'm sort of looking forward to getting into that end game scenario where I have all the kind of equipment I want, I have the character builds that I want. I'm just sort of steadily staging for that right now.
That's cool. I mean, Darkest Dungeon was one of those games to me that like I didn't think it would hold me that long. And it was a game that I played a little bit in early access and wanted to wait till the full release to see more of. But yeah, it's nice to hear that it's got its hooks in you like that.
I'm 40 hours into this campaign, which is significant, you know, considering it's a relatively simple game. I mean, it's mostly about combat, and there's a metagame that you manage. But I don't know, I found the combat to be wonderfully tense. It really just has no problem throwing a lot of curveballs at you and making you feel uncomfortable, and it's about kind of dealing with the weird stuff that it throws in your soldiers and unexpected situations. And there's just so many little dials you can tune to kind of manage the risk and reward yourself, which I really enjoy. So
yeah. So Evan, do you have like a because there's so many classes in that game and they're not like very archetypal. Do you have like a party that you're going to constantly, like a certain makeup?
Not in particular. I'd say, you know, there are really kind of two healers in the game right now, and I'm favoring the Vestal, which is sort of you could call her a priest character. I actually kind of like, you know, from a design standpoint, I like the occultist more. The way the occultist works, Tom, is he heals you, but the healing range is super variable. So whereas the Vestal is like standard healer, like I'm going to heal you between like 4 and 6 hit points every time. Yeah. The occultist is like from 0 hit points, so I could fail to heal you essentially to like 30 hit points, and he has a chance to like cause your character to bleed to take damage because he's an occultist. He's like basically like stitching together in like this really weird Lovecraftian way, and sometimes it works really well, but sometimes you get like heal your whole freaking health bar, and other times it's like, oh, here's 1 hit point, and by the way, you're going to take like a dot.
So you said you preferred that?
I think it's interesting. Like, I mean, like Steven said, these are not archetypical characters. This is not a priest or, something comparable to that. But I really like the Hellion. I think she's super fun. I think the Houndmaster is super fun. It's a character that has this dog that he kind of brings in, and he has a lot of cool bleed attacks that cause a bunch of enemies to bleed. That's super fun. The Plague Doctor has a lot of good status effecty stuff.
Yeah.
That has,
Is it the Jester? The guy, he looks like a Jester. Is his name the Jester in the game? Yeah, I like him too. That dude can do some absurd damage if you kind of get him in the right position that he needs to be in. Or no, he also has awesome buffs. Like he's almost like a necessity for me just because of like the speed buffs he can give.
Totally.
Are awesome.
He plays a lot of nice songs in the game. But the cool thing, just to bring one more point on this game, it has a lot of cool dynamics in terms of how you customize your party, in terms of what stats you favor. So there are these trinkets that you equip on your characters, and they give you certain buffs and certain advantages, and often with like a certain risk or disadvantage. But like initiative is a really big deal in the game, because say like on turn 1, all the enemies act first, and all your characters have low speed, and they act second, so they take damage. And on turn 2, say that's the same situation where all the enemies go first, like. You can build a really initiative-based party where you're always acting first. You have a higher chance of just eliminating characters and avoiding taking more damage and taking more status effects. Or you can favor dodge, so that you're just you're comfortable going last, but you're just dodging all their attacks and stuff like that. And both of those are like very viable approaches, and there are like a number of interesting ways you can play with that stuff. So it's simple but surprisingly deep. I think like some of the best games out there. So check it out.
Steven, what about you? What are you checking out right now?
I'm kind of in that weird funk, like where you get back from GDC and you're like, oh, I've been away from video games for a whole week. But I've been playing lots of Black Desert Online, which I know Tyler sort of did a preview of for you guys. And he wasn't exactly fond of it. I'm enjoying it more than he is, but I think, everything he had to say was super on point, which is that MMOs make like the worst first impressions. Like the whole concept of like, oh, you have to play this for 10 hours before it gets good is kind of broken in a way. And I totally understand where he's coming from in that regard, but it is like a really interesting game. Just the things.
Oh no, we lost him to the
oh no
torrents of the internet. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just the video crash. That's a good pose that I'm stuck in, though.
Proceed.
Oh, that sucks. There we go. Anyway, yeah, it's really interesting because like a lot of MMOs kind of have really shallow mechanics. Like, oh, here's your mount. Like you just get this at level 20. All it is it gets you places faster. In Black Desert Online, you'll get like a horse, and that horse has individual levels. It has its own skills. You can fight on the horse. You can breed horses. You can tame horses. Tame wild horses. Like everything kind of has these like branching depth to it that's really interesting. So for someone who's kind of like exhausted with the formula of MMOs, it's a really interesting game. It does a lot of things that are kind of subversive. I like it. So
I did not know. That sounds like a lot of horse, man. Like,
and that's just like one aspect of the game.
like even mounted combat. Like if you just told me like, oh yeah, it has mounted combat, I would be like, oh, that's like something that not a lot of MMOs have. And then you just kept listing horse things.
Horse things. Yeah, like you could be just like the horse whisperer in that game, and your entire life could just revolve around horses if you wanted to. It's interesting. Yeah, there's like boats, so you can be like a fisherman and just sail boats all day. It's definitely a unique MMO.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have someone be able to talk about it on the show as well, because not many of us really play MMOs, at least who deign to sit in the hot room that is the PC Gamer Show. But yeah, so like, I've heard a lot that it's very, very different. Like,
yeah.
And could you just like I mean, obviously you just explained that it's got a lot of depth to it in a way that MMOs don't, but like, does the formula differ? Is it still like fetch quests and kill 10 wolves, or how does that work?
Yeah, like it still has those types of quests, which is kind of a letdown. One of the things that like really kind of frustrated me, but then also I had this moment where I sort of understood the game. It's a very obtuse game. It reminds me of like EVE Online, where like people always joke about EVE Online being this super hard game to get into because it's just so obtuse and so dense. Black Desert kind of has those same feelings for me. But I had this moment where I realized that like quests in that game are not pointless, but you don't need to do them. Like, it's not how you progress as a character. Where in every other MMO, the formula is you go to a town, you pick up like 20 quests, you head out, you do all 20 quests, you come back, you level up, you go to a new town. In this game, there's tons of quests. You can do them if you want to, and they'll increase certain aspects of your character. But if you just want to like level up, there's other things you can do outside of that. So for the first like 20 hours, I was just doing every quest, and I was exhausted because that game has thousands of quests, like way too many that anyone could ever conceivably complete. So it has like sort of the same familiar structure, but then it does things differently, and it doesn't communicate them very well. So it's sort of hard to understand like what to expect from the game when you go into it. Especially in the beginning, because a lot of that stuff is sort of locked away until you've kind of invested an arbitrary number of hours, which is a shame.
One of our subscribers in Twitch chat, JBJ Blaze, says one of the things he disliked about BDO was the VO. The VO apparently is terrible.
Oh yeah, it's so bad. Yeah, so it is a Korean MMO, which is interesting too, because Korean MMOs are usually typically kind of one type of game. But this one's very different. But the localization is so not good. Even like the written English, like I'm laughing constantly at some of the sentence structure that they have, where it's just totally impossible to interpret. And the VO will range from like okay to just like head shakingly bad. But I mean, if you can kind of take it with a bit of humor, it's okay. The game doesn't take itself super seriously, so it's kind of easier to shrug that off than a game that's trying to build like this oppressive tone, and then the characters just have the worst voices you've like. Honestly, probably some of the worst voice acting I've heard in a long time.
Well,
Wow.
I'm going to be personally, I'm just going to hold out for the sequel, White Jungle Offline.
That's would that be the sequel or the prequel, Evan?
Yeah, come on.
Does the darkness go to light or the light goes to dark? I don't know.
I don't know, Tom.
That's one of
That's
those
what you
chicken or
gotta
the
find out.
eggs questions, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Well, we can jump along from that and start talking about GDC. For those of you who don't know or just joining the show, GDC is the Game Developers Conference. It was this big week-long thing in San Francisco where developers come and give talks about game design. There's also 2 huge show floors where devs can show off what they're working on or learn about other things in terms of game design, but also it's a really unique opportunity for us fools to go there and say, show us everything cool, because there's so much cool stuff there. So what I guess starting with Evan, what were some of the best stuff you saw? What were some of your favorite things?
I mean, GDC is an opportunity for good talks. I think I'll quickly mention, there's a really good Diablo postmortem. We've posted a couple articles from that included like the original 8-page design document that became Diablo. That was super nice to see, and just some of the anecdotes around that game, or like the moment that, like I wrote an article about how it was like this heavenly moment for the developer when Diablo changed from a turn-based game, which it originally was. They wanted to be like Wizardry or something along those lines, to a real-time game, and they just like basically hacked it so the turns happened 20 times a second or whatever. And that was kind of the moment the ARPG was born. It was just really cool to, now 20 years later, it will be in December at least, have that stuff captured and hear it from one of the folks who made that game. But
They get to show off our old PC Gamer demo disc, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yep, they did give that a mention. That was nice. So I think two of the standout things, I saw a hands-off demo of Mirage Arcane Warfare. So this is a first-person melee and ranged medieval-style combat game from the creators of Chivalry. If you guys remember that game, really popular, medieval warfare game. And
Lots of screaming.
Yeah.
There's a scream key.
There is a scream key, and they are bringing that sort of functionality back, which is exciting. I think what stuck out to me about Mirage, and I'm still going to be writing this up for the website, is just its art direction is really unlike anything. It's super vivid and surrealistic. So, they have these sort of like Arabic influences where these like super ornate palaces and Arabian architecture, but mixed in with these surrealistic, like magical colors and like lots of purple and orange and bright pink and stuff like that, but not in a way that's clashing or garish. Like the game is still very readable, feels like a skill-driven combat game in that way. Those things aren't in conflict with one another. It just feels super refreshing, and I think what's most refreshing about it is in 2016 is going to be all about this action first-person game. Or just MOBA games with MOBA type elements. And we're just going to continue to see that be a trend. It's going to evolve in different ways. We're going to talk about Paragon here in a second. That's going to be an example of that too. But obviously Overwatch, Battleborn, Paladins, there are others, but
too many.
Yeah. It's going to be it's going to be really competitive and interesting, I think. But in Mirage's case, it's going to be a $30 game. That's it. No big focus on microtransactions or free-to-play type stuff. And in that way, like the game is very focused on being itself, which I think is terrific, and I think is honestly distinguishes itself from those other games that I mentioned. If anything, it's I'll go into this more on what I write on the website, but it's trying to be more like a fighting game, which I think is super compelling. So. If you played Chivalry, you kind of know all about this, really, but it's not a game where you can just kind of spam certain actions. Like, it has sort of this initiative system where the combat is a little bit exchange-based, and where, like, if I block your attack, then my follow-up will have initiative or will, like, execute with greater speed. Excuse me. So, it's along the same principles, but there's magic now. And the magic is ranged, of course, so you'll have characters throwing out these big spells and effects and stuff like that. But it's designed in a way, like from what I saw, and I didn't play it, so it's a little bit to be determined, but where those actions like have kind of like a wind-up animation and stuff like that. So that's sort of telegraphing, like, here comes this spell. Like, now you have to decide how to deal with that. And, the way they put it to me, all the magic can be blocked. So, think about magic in terms of like, Ken's fireball in Street Fighter, right? Yes, it's almost more of like a way of controlling the space than it is like an attack to damage somebody. You know what I mean?
And that's very in line with what they did with Chivalry too, because Chivalry was almost just like a game of rock paper scissors, right? Where you had to like kind of predict what they were gonna do and then either block or counter or play to that. So that's not surprising to hear, but it's interesting because I don't think I've seen another Magic system kind of like that. Yeah. Usually Magic is just like your big, strong fireball spell.
Exactly, yeah. It's a really promising idea in that way. I mean, the word that they used to describe the system was, they wanted the combat to feel deliberate in that way. They don't want characters just sort of like sitting on a ledge and like spamming an attack until, so that like 2 of the 10 shots that you fire connects or something like that. It's like every kind of individual action is technical in the sense that you're deciding to do this and the timing and positioning of it matters, and you kind of pay the price for committing to an action, just like Virtua Fighter or Smash Brothers or something, I guess. So that was really promising. Looking forward to seeing more of that game. They're going to have a beta happening, I think, around PAX. I can't remember if it was PAX Prime or PAX East, honestly. No, like this summer. So yeah, pretty soon, I guess. The other one I saw, which is much stranger, this game called Escape from Tarkov. And it has the most ridiculous gun customization I've ever seen in a game. We have a video on our YouTube channel for it right now. YouTube.
Yeah, I can pull that up for the benefit of the stream and the YouTube audience.
Great, yeah, youtube.com/PCGamer. So this is a game from a Russian developer, literally in St. Petersburg. And it's the way I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm still sort of trying to understand the structure of it, is it's kind of like inspired by Stalker, but it doesn't have any supernatural elements, and it's a first-person shooter, but there's also like competitive and cooperative kind of survival-y elements as well. So that's all a bit kind of to be determined, but don't worry about it. It sounds, kind of like a kitchen sink approach to this kind of game, but as we're seeing in this video right now, the inventory system, really expansive, and, when you go in to modify a weapon, like we're looking at this AK-47 right now, there's just a ton of points of modification essentially, and right there we're seeing them pull off the dust cover, which is sort of like the spine of the weapon, the topmost spine. And in real life, not that I'm a weapons expert or something, like, hey, it's a dust cover, you want that there to keep out debris and stuff. So you can take that off and the gun still functions. You can see the internals moving around. That's kind of cool. But, because of the focus on fidelity, that actually has a meaningful impact on the way the weapon degrades over time and how often it'll jam and stuff like that. So it's not just like a dumb cosmetic change. And yeah, they'll have like these rail systems like we're looking at right now as well that just add all these other additional points of attachment, which can be used for flashlights and other types of optics and stuff like that. So the game just seems like a gun nut's dream. I think it remains to be seen whether there's like a really cool experience beneath that. I mean, what they showed to me was in pre-alpha, but I love seeing this kind of fidelity, this kind of focus on fidelity. I'm an Arma player. I'm a Red Orchestra player, and I love Rising Storm and those kind of games. And I think there's just a ton of room for that stuff to be explored. And I love just the kind of spirit that like Russian and Ukrainian and those kind of developers bring to these style games, where they're super gritty, super high fidelity, and yes, maybe like a little messy, and like everything doesn't fit together super well, but they're just so unapologetically themselves and unique in that way. So cool. Looking forward to just learning more about that game, because it's sort of a weird beast right now.
Yeah. Do you think it's going to be as you mentioned, obviously there's a level of fidelity there. Is it going to be as complex as Arma, or is it going to be a bit more approachable, at least from your impressions of it?
I don't think it'll be that as nuanced as Arma, and it's sort of hard to handle as Arma, from what I could tell. Sure. I think it'll play more like something like Insurgency or Squad. Which are sort of,
I like that.
Yeah, between Battlefield and Arma. I mean, one of the things they mentioned is you can reload, because your magazines are discrete items in your inventory. Like they have, there are sort of unique items, but if you hold R, you'll do a quick reload where you discard the magazine. It hits the floor, but you're able to more quickly put in a new one because you're not taking out the magazine, putting it in your chest rack or something, and then pulling out another one and then putting it in. So you're saving a second or two maybe. But yeah, you have to go back and pick up that magazine if you want it again. So again, I just love those little bits of fidelity. I'm a total geek for that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome.
Promising little signs, but we'll see what it adds up to. Yeah,
sure.
And it's built in Unity, which is really weird for this kind of game. I can't name another shooter, let alone a tactical high fidelity shooter in Unity.
So funny you should say that, because actually Unity had a pretty dang big booth at GDC this year.
Yeah.
And there were a couple games that I saw that they were showing off at their booth that I was really surprised were made out of Unity. Unity's, for a while Unity always had a sort of look to it, in my opinion. Yeah. Not that that's a bad thing, or that a game using Unity was bad for having that look. Just it kind of, you could always sort of tell. Umbrella Corps, the Resident Evil shooter that I played at PAX South and was pretty crazy about, is made in Unity.
Really?
And was at that booth. They had one stand at GDC this year showing off Umbrella Corps from and it was so weird to see Capcom in Unity's booth showing off a shooter, but it was, I mean, I think Unity is becoming an engine that allows for that more.
It's been around for 10 years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's pretty surprising what Unity is starting to be able to do. I would not have ever looked at especially Escape from Tarkov and been oh, that's a Unity game. It's really, really blending in. What about you, Steven? What was the best thing you saw? And you saw a lot. You were running around.
Yeah, so a lot of the things I was sitting in on was panels, which was really cool because, PAX is a great time to see games, but GDC you get panels and discussions that I don't think you necessarily would get at a more consumer-facing show like PAX, a lot more technical, and so I think the one that really kind of gave me an appreciation was the one about sound design for Overwatch, which Evan, you mentioned earlier in the show. And that article's on the website now, so you can go and read it. But it was just really cool to kind of sit in on that panel and hear about the level of thought that goes into designing the sound in a game like that. But not only that, but also how Blizzard is trying to kind of take that to the next level. So in Overwatch, they have sound design that is dynamically mixed based on which enemies are a greater threat to your character. So as you're playing, if certain enemies start, really kind of taking a chunk out of you, the game will mix the sound to emphasize their footsteps, their gun noises, everything to kind of try and point you in that direction. So things like that. They also do a lot of interesting stuff with like the goal they had going into it was to be able to play the game without the monitor on, which is totally unrealistic. You would never be able to do that in any way, shape, or form. But that lofty goal kind of made them shoot for the stars, and I guess you could say they kind of landed on the moon. And it was just interesting going through it. And like one of my favorite parts about that thing is, or that panel, was they were going through and they had audio examples. So anytime they talked about something, they would say, okay, let's play the audio clip and you can hear it. And at the end, they played it with just, like regular mixing. So, how most games would mix everything together with footsteps and everything. And it was okay, but it was kind of chaotic. And then they were like, okay, let's layer in all of the things we're doing like this. It's called the importance system, which is tracking enemy threats and then mixing the sounds accordingly and all that stuff. And they layered it afterwards. And it was like back to back. It was like this night and day difference where suddenly you were able to distinguish noises and you were able to kind of track threats a lot easier. You had much better spatial awareness. So it's really interesting kind of seeing just how much of an impact sound design can have in a first person shooter when you would think it's mostly all visual. So yeah, that was a cool panel.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't get enough appreciation. I think Counter-Strike is in a community that's really cares a lot about sound because they care about how it travels and how it behaves because it has this.
Right.
It's a one-to-one thing of like sound is information in that game, and if I hear a grenade plink against a wall, like that sends this amazing message that like eliminates certain possibilities of where and what and why and all that stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it has a unique subtle effect, I think, or it's like this subtle tool that developers can use, and I think that's a great example of Blizzard saying, instead of like, oh, this you're dying to this character a lot, and we're gonna like throw some UI at you or something, or give you like a buff, or like make you respawn faster, or like tune the game in some way.
Right.
They're just making that character literally louder and easier to detect for that individual player. Is that right?
Yeah. So yeah, basically, like you said.
I mean, I don't think I've ever used sound as a tool more in a game than Overwatch, to the point where it almost feels like their sound design is so good that like some abilities are slightly nerfed because of it. Like the example I have is that Junkrat, the guy, the like grenade launcher guy, his ultimate is this big wheel that he yells like a really loud thing. You hear a motor rev, and you can hear that anywhere on the map because all the ultimates, or most of the ultimates, have like those global sounds. And then he gets to control the wheel for like 10 seconds and drive it
like
to you and detonate it.
Right.
But because the sound is so good and because that sound is global, he could be far away from you behind a wall. You hear that sound, you hear the direction it's coming from, and then you turn and prepare to destroy the wheel before it gets to you. And if that sound wasn't directional or wasn't global, that ultimate would be way stronger because you just get wrecked by it and surprised.
Yeah, and like, what's his name? Agent 76. He also has like a pretty powerful ultimate where he can basically just like point the gun. Like he doesn't even have to aim. He just sort of has to, point the screen at players and just pull the trigger. And if you're caught out in the open, you'll die. But there's a really distinct build up to that ultimate going live, where when you hear it, you have seconds to react. And that's what they wanted, or that's what they said they wanted, is they wanted people to never feel like they just got killed out of nowhere. They always wanted people to feel like, oh, I didn't react. That was on me. I wasn't fast enough. I had all the information available and I just didn't use it well. So I think that's really interesting. I think, good on them for, putting that much importance on it.
Yeah, hopefully sound packs will be a part of that, so I can just change that sound to be like, yo, you're gonna die. Turn around. Cowboy man is about to kill your whole team in one shot.
Yeah, he does that.
Do something.
Well, it's multiple shots, just very quickly.
Okay. Okay.
Doesn't feel like it.
In TF2, this is a thing. You could customize the hit sounds in the game. So, when it was basically like a hit notification, almost like in Call of Duty, where you had that visual, I guess, and audio indicator, but it was just audio in TF2. And people changed it to all kinds of different things, like the Bill Nye the Science Guy intro theme and like the Sonic the Hedgehog ring like pickup sound and all this other stuff. So it's just a cute way of like customizing your experience, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see if they actually add any mod support or anything like that. I think they said
microtransactions. I mean, they're already selling voice packs. So not selling, but it is loot in the game. Voice packs are so.
Yeah.
you can sort of buy them, I guess.
I think when I interviewed Jeff Kaplan like a few months ago, they were saying, and obviously the way he was speaking is that they really don't know 100% what they're going to sell or not yet. But what he was saying is he was like, I don't think we're going to sell individual items, like have you be able to say, I want this skin, I'm going to buy this skin. But they are pretty much definitely going to sell the actual crates that hold the items. So there's probably going to be some form of that, yes. Switching to VR, because we did see a lot of it at this show. One of the games I saw that this wasn't one of the best things I saw at GDC, but it was one of the most intriguing, was this game called Dragonfront, which is it's going to be in the launch window of Oculus, and it's an Oculus exclusive, which I guess just means the store, not necessarily... The whole Oculus HTC Vive exclusive thing is really confusing because Oculus has said that all of their quote-unquote exclusives are just exclusive to the store, and if Valve would work with them to make the Vive compatible with the Oculus store, then the games would work on the Vive also. But Valve doesn't have any incentive to do that, because why would they? Because they own the largest platform in PC gaming, right? Like, they have Steam. They don't need to go onto Oculus Store also. But where was I? Yes, Dragonfront, that game. It's a card game. It's kind of like a board/card game. And they're kind of going for, it's by High Voltage. They're kind of going for also like a Hearthstone-y feel, but with a little bit more tactical elements to it. And it was really, really cool to see a card game in VR and to see like a board with units that you play and then you attack your opponent. And also the other cool thing about it is that you could see your opponent's face is a giant mask on their side of the board, and you can see where they're looking. So if they look down at like a specific unit of yours, you kind of know that they're like going for that unit. But the actual game itself was like not amazing. It wasn't bad by any means. I enjoyed my time with it. I'm looking forward to playing more of it. But also it was like an okay card game.
Well, I don't know. This sounds like a total diss on Hearthstone, so forgive me. I don't know.
Diss on it, man. Go ahead.
I mean, it sounds like it's turning what is a pretty passive experience, a casual experience, just in the sense that most people are relaxing when they're playing Hearthstone. They're like, you can just eat a dinner while you're playing Hearthstone, I think.
A lot of people watch Hearthstone on Twitch while playing Hearthstone.
You can get a bunch of games in. It's taking it from being passive in that way to being like an active, I'm in a 3D space, I'm fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Or something. You know, throwing down cards, and I don't know if I want that. I don't know if I want to be present in cards in this like Blue Eyes White Dragon, you know.
Why not
situation? Like, I mean, this is like the fundamental thing we're getting into with VR. Like, you know, we're talking about, hey, we're going to be having a special VR week on the site next week. So if you're interested in this topic, you know, by all means, come check that out with us. But like, separating the novelty from just the value and fun and the experience of this, like somebody, it sounds like you're saying, I mean, not to generalize, they took Hearthstone, they put it into VR, that type of experience. But what does that actually like add to the experience? Oh, it adds like eye movement and head tracking, so you can see like, oh, he's eyeing that card. So now there's this kind of like poker-like element where there are tells, perhaps, where body language can reveal intentions, or you can like feint that, for example. That sounds really cool. But beyond that, is there anything else? I
mean, to be clear, it is the experience of Hearthstone put into VR, but it is a very different game because there are board elements and because like all the cards are different and stuff like that. Oh, so is there like
positioning?
Yeah, there's positioning. It's a 4x4 grid of a board, and half the board is yours and the other half is your opponent's, and you have to actually move to the other end of the board to attack their like castle, which is their life total basically. So it plays very differently.
Well,
that sounds specific. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. I was just saying I don't believe in the heart of the cards, so.
I wanted to know how specific sort of the tells were. Like, did you, because I feel like that's something like in poker, it's so subtle, but in VR, like that kind of very specific movement isn't necessarily its strength. It was kind of always the problem with like the Kinect and other things like that too. So like, can you really tell if someone's looking specifically at one card? Over others?
Yeah, you can really tell what somebody is looking at on the board. Like you can really tell that. I didn't get much of an experience of how much that information that actually gives, because I was a brand new player, so of course I was looking at every card always, and I was reading everything, and I didn't have much time to look at my opponent's face during that. But it was also like I knew it was happening, and a lot of the time, like you have this this champion, I think it's called, where it's just like a big thing that costs 15 mana to summon and is like a really, really strong unit. But you can spend that mana over the course of any turns. So if you have like a little bit of extra mana at the end of a turn, you can just like dump it into your champion. Cool. And then once it reaches 0, you can play it. But the champion is to your right. Like if I am the head, right, it's like about... It's weird because you can use distance in VR. It's probably about like 2 to 3 feet below your chin and to the right? So it's like just kind of diagonal to you. But it's so much more at an extreme than anything else on the board that if your opponent is thinking about using their champion, like because they are looking far to their side to check it, basically.
Right.
So I like those tells, but the other things that the game didn't have was like your hand is only visible like when you call it up by pressing a button on the Xbox controller or on the simple input device, the Oculus like remote thing. So your hand just isn't there. I really would have loved to see my hand and my opponent's hand represented in the space, so that when an opponent was looking at a specific card in their hand, you knew. Because that's something that you can kind of get tells and bluffs in Hearthstone. Because if somebody keeps highlighting one card, or if like they have had a card in their hand since the beginning of the game, you can start to make these predictions about what that card will be. But since the hand is just invisible normally in in Dragonfront, you can't make those predictions. So they've added some of that, and then they've taken other bits away. But it's really like it's promising is the thing. Like I want to play more of it. I just don't know how long I'll want to play it.
I think VR is going to be an opportunity for developers of competitive games, especially, to explore like the post-match expression space. I think where, I mean, I play hockey. I've done competitive games for a lot of my life, and shaking somebody's hand or not shaking their hand, like that decision or like what you say to them in that moment is kind of an interesting exchange. And I'd love to see some cool stuff done there. I mean, like even stuff like Far Cry 3 multiplayer. No one watching this played that probably. But it was developed by Massive, the folks who made The Division. It had this sort of weird thing where it was like voting where a losing player was like shamed by the winners in this multiplayer cutscene or something. Brutal. So you had like these weird emotes where like it was basically implied that like you're gonna kill this guy even though you just like killed him 20 times in the match or something. It was weird, but anyway, I think that's an area where you can, because people do that in Hearthstone. They just spam those emotes like crazy. So why not kind of take that to the next level?
By the way, you got called out in chat for saying Yu-Gi-Oh instead of Yu-Gi-Oh. I wasn't gonna say anything. Because I didn't want to.
I held my tongue.
but then, Steven and I, we did the multiplayer vote at the end of the match and decided to shame you as it went.
Good job. We did it.
Did either of you guys get to try Universe Sandbox 2 in VR?
No. I saw our colleague James using it, and I've played with, Universe Sandbox on desktop.
Yeah, I got to use that on the Vive, and that was one of the coolest things I've used on Vive so far.
I mean, it's basically a Galactus simulator. Is that right?
It's like, it's exactly what the name implies. It's a universe kind of celestial body sandbox. You can create planets. They all have really realistic physics. You can shoot comets at them, and or you can load into the actual solar system and see that. Or there's a lot of presets that you can call up and then mess with. And it is just a sandbox, but it's just such a compelling experience to be standing in space, looking down at the Earth, and then you can just take the controllers and kind of like iPhone controls, like spread them apart a couple times, and you're suddenly at like the scale of Mars to the sun. And then you do it a few more times, and like suddenly the Kuiper Belt is just like sitting in front of you, and like the universe, or, like the solar system is, you know, the size of like a pizza in front of you. It's super, super cool to see that level of scale. I was really impressed by that. And that game's in early access right now. You can actually just buy it if you want to play it on desktop right now. And then the VR portion of it is in beta until the Vive actually comes out.
Cool. So, you know, if you want to have a deep existential epiphany,
Basically.
Yeah.
this is the place for that. If you want to be like, wow, we are really, really small and none of this matters. I'm just gonna stay in here, seeing how many moons I can attach to Earth's orbit before they implode.
Tears just coming down out of the visor.
Does the Vive have tear ducts? Like
It's gonna need that.
yeah.
Wipers, yeah.
Short it up.
Wiper blades, yeah. You're sounding kind of like Justin Roiland right here in that interview that James did with him. I wanna encourage everyone as our final thing, unless Steven or Evan, you have something important to say about GDC that you want to get off.
No, not really. I just want to talk about Paragon so we can start hating on it already.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But-
I highly encourage everyone. The last little bit of GDC is James Davenport interviewed William Pugh, who was half of the creative team of the Stanley Parable, and Justin Roiland, who is the creator of Rick and Morty, along with Dan Harmon, but he wasn't there. They're working on a VR game thing. They call it an accounting app, and I've posted the interview into Twitch chat, and you guys should go to PCGamer.com and search for Justin Roiland, William Pugh. This interview it's too good to pass up. The whole thing just reads like I think someone said on Reddit, like an Onion article. Like it just reads like a joke, right? But they're making an accounting game. But it's not a game. It's like the whole interview, they just claim that it's genuinely just like an app for accountants to account in VR. Like that's what they say it is. And they would not break character the entire time. And I think honestly at this point, there is an equal chance that it is an accounting app as it is like a Stanley Parable level game about accounting. Like I don't know anymore.
It's an interesting marketing strategy.
But I want to read this.
Potentially lying like completely.
Yeah, just don't tell anyone about your game. I wanna read this one monologue of Justin Roiland's, where it's his longest answer in it, because you got all existential about having a crisis,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. So James asked, like, down the road, where do you see VR as a whole? And Roiland's response was, the living room. They call it the living room because it used to be when your relatives died, you put them in this room and everyone would mourn their death. It wasn't called the living room. At some point, the mortuaries, what are those companies called? The people that deal with the dead, the 6 feet under types, the dead peoples. They took it, they made a business out of it, and then they renamed those rooms to living room because why don't we spend time there? It's a place for the living. Now, the question was, what will VR be in 5 or 10 years down the road?
Oh, boy.
And it continues. I really believe the next transition for that room, the living room, will become the VR room. And I think it's going to be the next 5 years you're going to see the most unreal adoption of this technology. And in all sincerity, it's going to change everything. That's the actual answer. He continues. And then as Google continues to develop advanced AI and as Boston Dynamics continues to develop really scary, walking, creepy robot monsters,
They do.
and all those things come together, we really are headed towards the Matrix. I think the Matrix is true, and we're all going to die anyways, so who cares?
Got so dark at the end.
Oh, man.
He just ends with that.
What was that answer?
I know.
Man. Beat that, Ubisoft.
It's just amazing. You're not going to get that answer from anybody else in the
Oh,
world.
that's so weird.
Good interview.
It's oh my god. I just can't.
Thank you for sharing that, Tom. But yeah, Paragon. I'm ready to dunk on this game. You ready?
What a transition. Yeah,
Oh my
let's talk
God.
about
Bring
Paragon.
it.
Once again, for those people who don't know, Paragon is Epic Games' new, going to be free to play, third person kind of Smite camera style MOBA. And it's currently in early access on the Unreal launcher, where you can buy in for $20 if you'd like. Evan,
Yeah.
How do you feel about
Well,
Paragon?
well, hold on. I have to get in my angry persona. Like, is there like a motorcycle jacket or something that I can wear?
Get you like a spike, like gloves and stuff.
It's really
like
my
that.
thing. I just love angry reviews of things. That's the primary thing that I produce for viewers. No, so Paragon is if you played Smite, if you played Monday Night Combat, a game I really liked a lot. So I'm not biased against this kind of genre. I love Smite, love Monday Night Combat, but Paragon is third-person perspective MOBA. I think that's how I would describe it to anybody. In Unreal Engine 4, looks super, super great. Super gorgeous. I think some pretty unique character designs mixed in with some archetypes from MOBAs, which is fine. But high fidelity, like precise kind of art, not cartoony or anything like that. But it is played at the pace of a top-down MOBA, perhaps even slower, like of Heroes of the Storm or something, which I wouldn't even necessarily call a slow game, but it's just sort of feels like that. So in other words, your movement speed, your attack speed, your attack range,
So slow.
your ability, like your escape moves and stuff like that, which are almost non-existent, at least in the current version of the game, super muddy, like filled with molasses. So I just completely reject the idea that it's the right kind of game. It's the game that it should be, because it's got this great, it's taking advantage of, it's using this perspective, but not taking advantage of it whatsoever. Because when you play a game like Smite and you play a game like Monday Night Combat, you're like, okay, like verticality becomes a thing, obviously. Aiming is much more of a thing, obviously, because you're controlling a character with like a reticle, essentially. But it's, I get the sense that, this sounds like it's like the overall excuse for my complaints, and it's not even that. Like they're probably bringing it to console eventually, and they need it to be able to be played on a controller, which means you probably need to slow it down a little bit. But it just doesn't work whatsoever. I think the three different characters I played, and I got to see a number of other characters you guys played with, they like their abilities are really kind of like intentionally limited, it felt like, to make the game like less driven by skill shots and less driven by like technical prowess, essentially, where I was playing this character who's like loaded in a robot, and he's sort of like a grenade launcher kind of character, throws out mines and grenades and stuff like that. The range of everything was just like super slow, and like everything had like a 5-second delay on it, and like I guess there's some skill associated with timing those attacks and stuff like that, but like we'd find ourselves in situations, I remember like the last match we played, we had like an enemy basically just taunting us in the middle lane, like firing shots at us, and it was like a three or 4-on-1, just 3 of us or 4 of us just staring at this guy, and I'm like, I feel like none of us have the ability to catch him at all. There's nothing we can do to just pursue him or like encircle him or anything, and that was super frustrating, because it has the trappings of a third-person action game, like a lot of these games do, but it plays nothing like that at all. So I just found it completely unsatisfying, to be honest. And that's disappointing, because it's gorgeous. It has some elements of originality to it in terms of the look and feel, but in terms of just the moving, shooting folks, everyone's super durable. They take a ton of shots. The ganking is unsatisfying. The abilities are completely unimaginative, I'm comfortable saying.
Oh man, they're so bad. The
Like-
kits are the most boring kits
Yeah.
I've ever seen in a MOBA.
I'll let you go off on this, since you're more MOBA
So
dude.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, like, is there any perceivable benefit to having a game move this slow in like a third person sort of because I have to wonder, like, what was the intention? Like, obviously it was intentional to kind of build it this way, but I don't understand what that intention was.
I think it's that they were going for a MOBA. I think that if you took Paragon and you made it kind of isometric top down like League or Heroes or Dota, it would feel right at home. Right.
Weird. Okay. Yeah.
I think that they probably used those games to like base their numbers off of. And honestly, I think that if you're a hardcore MOBA guy, you probably won't dislike Paragon. Like, it didn't seem, we wrote this, Chris Thurston from the UK and James wrote this really nice piece that I'll post in Twitch chat right now which you can find if you just go to pcgamer.com/Paragon and look for it there, where James had never played MOBAs, and he kind of like was very on it. And Chris is a huge Dota and Heroes of the Storm guy, and he was more positive on the game. And I think that's understandable because it really is MOBA paced. But the problem is when you're this like 80 carry with 2 guns in your hands, right? Like I was using a guy named Twin Blast, or as I like to call him, Shooty McGunhands, because that's basically all he was. He was like, I'll paint a picture for everyone listening on the podcast as well. Imagine the most generic white dude, like, action game hero. Nathan Drake mixed with the guy from Last of Us, mixed with, every other white dude protagonist ever. And then give him Solid Snake's robot arm, but on both arms, and you're done. Like, that is what he is. And he had 2 guns, but his attack speed was his base attack speed was 1 attack per second, which is like not slow in any sort of MOBA, right? If you're right-clicking to attack in any sort of MOBA, 1 attack per second is like, whatever, that's fine. But when you got 2 guns and you're like behind his shoulders shooting at dudes with these guns, it feels horrific. It feels terrible. Now here's the kicker. His passive ability, because it's just like any other MOBA where they all have a passive, 3 activatable abilities, an auto attack, and an ultimate, right? Like that's the formula. They follow the formula. His passive ability is that he gets his attack speed is 15% quicker. Like that.
That was his ultimate?
No, that's his passive. That's his passive.
God. I thought you said that was his ultimate. I was like, oh, that is boring.
And he feels
right, okay, but still.
And he feels slow to shoot. And like that's a stat that you don't need to put on a passive. Like you can put that stat on just like his stats, and that'll be fine.
I think most of the characters I played had an attack speed buff. Whatever, that's fine. But yeah, the archer character I played, her ultimate was, she's she's like throwing out arrows. But now they split into 3, and they have like kind of more of a splash effect or something.
Yeah.
It's not like a singular skill shot that like travels down a lane or something, or I can like teleport. Like I was just struck by how little movement there is in that game, and how underwhelming the existing movement was. I mean, the way they handle their solution to mounts essentially is you hit shift and you wait several seconds, and then you go into like a sprint mode. Every character has this. There's no like mounts or anything that you ride. And I mean, how ridiculous is it to be playing a third-person game where you want to run and you have to wait to run? That makes no sense.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. I mean, just give me a static movement speed that increases the pace of the game and the value of movement and the skill associated with movement, like Monday Night Combat, like Smite. These games have solved these problems like for years. They've I think that's what frustrates me most. I mean, this genre isn't exactly a new genre, even from this perspective. Plenty of games have had to deal with these issues and have kind of walked down these roads and figured stuff out for us already. And Paragon is just not paying attention to that stuff, apparently.
Yeah, and Kunifu points out, a subscriber in Twitch chat points out that Twin Blast is by far the most uninspired character design, but the others aren't bad. I agree. Basically all the other character designs, or most of the other character designs, are actually really pretty cool character design.
But the ability design.
But the ability design is dumb because, okay, Twin Blast and do you remember the archer's name?
No.
Choose a generic archer name and you got it. Sparrow. That's what it was. It was Sparrow.
Okay.
So they both have. This is the weird thing. They're both 80 carries, so I'll give them that. But their left click is just a basic auto attack, right? Then I think it's both on. I think it's actually the same key bindings too. Their Q, if I'm wrong about this, it's at least the same abilities. Twin Blast's Q is his attack speed increases for a couple seconds. Sparrow's Q is her attack speed increases for her next 3 hits. Mm-hmm. Twin Blast's E is a grenade that he throws out and it deals AoE damage. Sparrow's E is a AoE circle that she puts down where arrows rain from the sky and deal damage.
Yep.
And then, like you said, Sparrow's ultimate is this spread shot thing. And Twin Blast's ultimate is he shoots rockets that do AoE damage in a line. And then they only place their kits differ is on the right click, where Twin Blast has a short little dodge, like a jump out of the way, and Sparrow has like a piercing arrow.
Yeah, penetrating.
So you have two characters who are in the same role with nearly identical kits. Like all the abilities are slightly different here and there with like small effects, but only one ability is fundamentally different between those two characters. And it's insane to me that they would ever do that. It's insane to me that, and the only thing that I can think it is that the people designing the characters in Paragon are used to designing shooters and have no idea how to design a MOBA kit and have not looked at any other games for inspiration.
Yeah, I almost liken it. I mean, maybe you can jump in on this, Steven. I almost liken it to, this is a very weird comparison, but the Elder Scrolls Online, where you have this single player franchise,
right?
And it feels a certain way, and the movement feels a certain way, and the collision detection, and the flinch animations, and just those little details and the kinetic details of combat and movement. And then you put that into an MMO context, and necessarily like you're not going to have that same level of fidelity and detail. And like when all those things just feel off 5%, that's all it takes to kind of throw the entire experience off. And you have this like big landmark franchise to compare it to side by side, and you're like, oh man, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, no, and that was totally the Elder Scrolls problem when it first came out. They've gotten a little bit better at it. Like they've done some little tweaks, and the hit detection feels a little bit better, and there's a little bit more weight behind the attacks in that game now.
Cool.
So like theoretically, they could improve Paragon, right?
Yeah, they could. And League and other games have shown that like it's never too late to just rework a character too. In terms of kits.
Sort of the benefit of like games as a service is, they kind of, you can expand on them, you can kind of flesh things out as things go. But I mean, if it's this, like hearing you guys go back and forth, like I'm exhausted just hearing you talk about this game because it sounds so painfully dull. I feel like I'm really interested to hear, I know I just restarted that sentence like 8 times, but I'm really interested to hear what a Smite player thinks of Paragon, because it's the only point of comparison I have, and I don't think that it would ever match up. I think that it would feel way too slow to a Smite player. Well, and one of the things that I love about Smite is, and I don't know if Paragon has this or if they're planning to add this, but like Smite, playing like the basic MOBA modes in Smite is not my favorite way to play Smite. Like I'm all about the arena mode. I'm all about like the more action-packed modes, the stuff that kind of steps away from sort of the traditional MOBA stuff. Does Paragon have any of that, or is it basically just like, here's your 3 lanes, go bananas?
It's an Epic's like early access, which is actually what they call it right now, and there's only one map. I believe there's only one map that we played at least.
Yeah.
So to be determined. I'm actually unaware of that, but just the other comparison I make real quick is like, it sort of feels like, imagine that you're playing a MOBA, but everyone is sort of like an M1 Abrams tank. And
that's a good idea for a MOBA, though. I like that.
World of Tanks. There you go.
I guess you're right.
Like, there's just no emphasis on movement in this game. I didn't see any sort of like hook grab attacks. I didn't see any sort of like leaping lunges where I'm putting myself in danger, but I'm behind the enemy suddenly. Like no like flanks or like duplication of characters, so I'm not sure like which one I should go after. Like there's so much like rich mechanical stuff in this genre. League of Legends has and Valve have just written entirely interesting playbooks for this genre, and I just feel like it's completely being ignored.
Yeah, I that's my fundamental problem with Paragon is I don't think that it's actually, from a MOBA player's standpoint, a bad MOBA. I really don't. I just think it gives me pretty much no reason to play it over any other MOBA.
Yeah.
And it is still early. And of course, we've talked before on the show about how just because something is in early access doesn't mean you can't criticize it, but it does give them time to change stuff. And actually, while we were talking about Paragon, we got a new subscriber on Twitch. So welcome, Borrowed Time TM. Thank you for subscribing. And they immediately mentioned that they heard in Lyric's stream that the developers apparently are aware of the speed issue that people are complaining about, that it's too slow. And so they may adjust, I think they'd need to do some pretty severe adjustments, but it is early, and let's hope they listen to what people are saying.
Yeah, I mean, if they,
it doesn't excuse it. It's just
no.
If they truly change that, it would it's like changing the gear ratio of your car or something. Like it's a fundamental.
It's a big change.
The size of the map, the distance between objectives, the cooldowns of abilities, like everything would have to change, I think, for them to like seriously make that different.
Yeah.
I just like, Super Monday Night Combat and the follow-up, those games were flawed in interesting ways, but they had a sense of calamity that I love. And Smite, again, has a sense of like, oh shit, like somebody's behind me, like I need to twitch and react. And it's not, it's not Counter-Strike. It's not like I'm asking you to make a headshot like through a keyhole at like 1,000 meters or something. But you have these moments of like pivot and movement and physical awareness that gets prompted. And it's, if you're building a third-person kind of game, I think you just have to have some of that, and it has none of that right now.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm at a loss, man. I just think that I need to see some changes, or I just have no interest.
Yeah, we want the game to be good.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, definitely, because it's really pretty. Oh man, is it pretty? But
right.
we can move on. We've beaten the horse. I think.
Certifiably dead.
Yeah, unless there's anything, Steven, did you have any burning questions about Paragon?
No, I mean, I think you guys have definitely encouraged me probably not to be super eager to check it out. I mean, like I wanted to, of course you want it to be good, but I mean, I think the space is just already so crowded. And to see more games enter into it and then to not do anything unique. Like it's interesting watching Heroes of the Storm evolve, because when that first kind of came out, that was my reaction to it, was like, oh my God, like Blizzard's getting into the MOBA game. Like, come on guys, it's a little bit late. It's going to be super competitive. But I feel like they've really distinguished themselves being more accessible, but then also doing really creative stuff. Like,
yes.
Oh, you have a character who it's two people playing one guy. And ideas like that are just really unconventional. And I think that's really awesome. So to see this game come out, have the potential to do all these creative things and then spoil all of it on making just the most kind of derivative game or derivative sounding game, that's a big disappointment. Hopefully that they listen. I mean, that's the benefit to early access is if they're willing to, hopefully they can kind of pivot the direction of the game and do some more interesting things with it. So yeah, that's all I have to say. I mean, how long are the game rounds actually? That's the one question I do have.
Long.
Yeah.
I saw
to hear either.
I saw Kunifu in the chat say that they could go up to an hour or longer. And the game that we played, we played a game where we were getting stomped, like destroyed, and we conceded at 20 minutes, and probably that game was going to keep going for another 10 minutes at least, minimum.
Right.
So normal long MOBA length, and I have to say normal long MOBA length because then I immediately played Heroes of the Storm after I played Paragon, and I was like, I'm level 16 at 10 minutes. Like, what is this? It just felt so much snappier.
Totally.
But yeah, let's move on. I have fooled our graphics guy, Anthony, who has already gone to the next topic. He's mad at me, I can see. But let's talk about cross-platform play, because there's been a point of discussion as of late. Sony and Xbox are trying to work a little better together, basically, and get their online games working together, meld those communities a little bit, which makes sense for them because they use relatively identical control schemes. I'm not going to say completely identical because I'm sure there's someone in the chat right now who would be like, what the heck, you're crazy. But close enough. And Gabe Newell was quoted in a random email that he sent to a random person because his email is available.
It's how Valve
publicly.
PR tends to operate these days.
Yeah.
Just
Love it.
Suddenly appear on Reddit to name call people or, fans email Gabe. Great.
But he said he'd be all for cross-platform play with PS4 players in respect to, I think it was specifically towards Rocket League. But, that's what you have a lot to read into when it's a 5-word email response. So there you go. But I want to know what you guys think about cross-platform play. I mean, obviously, in games like shooter games, it's like controller users are just at a massive disadvantage. Like that's kind of undeniable.
Yeah.
But what about other games? What about games like Rocket League? Games I'm struggling to think of more examples. But what if Chivalry, was available for that?
Yeah, I think in Rocket League, most people would say it's been proven to be a success. I mean, if anything, it kind of gives the game an interesting texture. I mean, I think at least when I was playing, I haven't played it in several months. Obviously PS4 users can't chat with you directly. They can issue those voice commands or whatever, but that's something that's missing. That's a bit of asymmetry, but there's kind of a certain fun that comes with, these guys are on a couch, or like this person's on TV, and just that knowledge gives the game a kind of a separate kind of texture when you're up against different competitors. I think that's a little bit interesting. But yeah, a lot of people don't remember CS:GO was basically pitched as a cross-platform shooter. I mean, that's something that Valve was actively saying that they were going to do around 2011 and 2012 before the game released in like August 2012. Like, yeah, it's going to have cross-platform play, and we'll figure out matchmaking and all that stuff. But we're going to do this, and they were demoing it on consoles actually, at PAX and stuff like that. And they eventually abandoned that, and I think that was definitely the right decision. So yeah, safe to say, I don't think it makes sense in a competitive shooter or any competitive game that isn't a racing game or a fighting game. It makes sense. I can't think of other stuff. I mean, sports games are fine because we usually play those on controllers too.
I think like one of the awesome benefits of cross-platform is that because you don't like segregate your populations to each version of the game that they're playing. When there's nothing worse than like a multiplayer game that's maybe not like a huge smash hit, and then the community kind of slims down a bit, and you go to play and you can't find anyone to play with. But if you're on cross-platform, you're dealing with a much wider pool, and it can be really like it has a big impact, especially in games like MMOs. If you're like, there's nothing worse in an MMO than investing all this time in a character and then being on a dead server. Especially when they charge you money to like transfer it to a different server. Like choosing a server is a big choice to make. So I'm like Final Fantasy 14 is a game that is cross-platform. And it makes a lot of sense. It helps the community be healthy as long as it doesn't, like you said, if there's not a competitive angle there that gives anyone a certain edge. The other thing I don't like necessarily is like cross-platform is great, but if it means less freedom on the PC because consoles are kind of closed systems, so you don't get like as much modability or things like that, then that's something else where I'd probably raise my eyebrow.
Yeah. Honestly, we probably need to broaden our use of this term. I mean, it's about to be used in other contexts. Twitch cross-platform play and VR. I'm convinced VR cross-platform will be a big thing because developers are going to have as VR kind of rolls out, yes, there's going to be fewer people using VR than have like consoles and PCs and stuff like that, obviously. But they're going to want to make these games and put resources in them and make them interesting and fun. So I think a lot of developers, some developers are going to end up exploring these kind of like asymmetrical approaches where a VR user plays with someone on a PC or on a console, but both people are doing different things, either in the same room or like on the same machine or on separate, like a networked multiplayer thing. So like maybe the VR user is like the pilot, but the person on their desktop is the commander or something. And like, yes, there have been unsuccessful approaches to this. I think Dust 514 from CCP is a good example of that, and we can talk about why that was or wasn't flawed. But Twitch isn't going to be another avenue of this, where we're going to see broadcasters playing with their spectators. This is something that Amazon and Twitch are like really promoting. They were talking about it at GDC. They had panels and stuff on this, where it's like really simple right now, where you're basically going to be entering chat commands to participate or to like influence someone's instance, I guess, by adding like effects or challenges, by people vote and stuff like that. But I think it's going to continue to grow in those areas, and I think we certainly welcome like bigger pools of people to play with, as long as it doesn't hamper our experience.
And just jumping in real quick on that VR thing, there's already a couple games that do that, and Keep Talking Nobody Explodes does that with one person in the VR headset. And then also there's a game coming out called Ruckus Ridge, which is one person is an Oculus, and they're looking around a room, and the other people are sitting on a couch with controllers, and they kind of have a top-down view of the Ruckus Ridge, of like the whole map. And so it's this asymmetrical gameplay. So we should just, what I'm saying is we need to have Evolve come back as Evolve 2, where the monster is in a rift. Who's not excited for that idea?
Man, poor Evolve.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can harp on this real quick. Evolve, it was amazing the way that Evolve just got like so harped on by the internet and just so continually dumped on for months. I even saw like a video last week of like this montage of all like the E3 appearances and performances and stuff, and like the promises that 2K and Turtle Rock were making about the game. It was a good game.
Yeah.
Like, it had flaws, like it had obvious flaws. You know, a lot of people don't want to chase a monster around. That's just not interesting gameplay to them. But I think it was a sound. It was like one of the most gorgeous games on PC when it released, for one thing. But it had a lot of interesting stuff behind it. I think we should admire the asymmetry that they built in there. And it just didn't take off. And a lot of people like really pinned it on the DLC. I actually found the DLC to not be that offensive. I mean, it was all just cosmetic stuff on the side, and like the monsters were expensive, sure, but like I don't know, a lot of games had that kind of stuff, and we didn't heap the same amount of negative attention on them. So
I think it was like a really easy scapegoat for people with the DLC, like because I felt the same way. Like people really kind of blew it out of proportion. It was kind of egregious and it was confusing at first, but they kind of they worked through it and they kind of got the message across a bit clearer with that. But yeah, like, it was just sort of like interesting ideas that didn't necessarily work well. And then it just sort of faded into obscurity. That's still like one of my favorite Steam charts to like look at. Like go look at the Steam chart for Evolve over the course of a year, and it's fascinating how like high that game rose and then how quickly it fell off.
So here's something I just looked up. Evolve was not cross-platform. Do you think that would have helped the game at all?
Yeah, potentially. I mean,
Yeah.
it certainly had a population issue, like Steven was just saying. I mean, I think it continues to, and the monster controls, I think, arguably a little bit better, at least in my personal experience with a controller. So yeah, sure.
Do you think you could do a game like that where it was, let's say, it seemed like it would be too hard with 4v1, but like if it was like a 2v1 game where all the 2s were PC players and all the 1s were console players, where the monster was always played by someone with a controller on a console and the hunters were always played by people on PC with mouse and keyboard. Like, do you think that would work, or would the asymmetrical player pool just not like go for that?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. It's a hypothetical.
I'm not gonna play with it a little bit at least. Whatever, fine.
Sorry.
Moving on. God, I guess that just got shut down.
Brutal.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting, but
Cool.
I'll take my bitter energy and we'll move on into the Twitch chat Q&A. If anybody has questions for us, please let us know. Tag us with @PCGamer in the Twitch chat. It'll show up on this little computer box in front of me, and we will answer your questions about anything in PC gaming this week, whether it be about cross-platform, Paragon, GDC, anything you want, just let us know. If you are watching on YouTube or listening on iTunes, once again, I'm sorry, we cannot read your minds, but you are always welcome to join us on our new day, now Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time, right here on twitch.tv/PCGamer. And if not, that's great too. We love you wherever you're listening from.
You've gotten really good at that.
I've said it a lot now. This is our something like our 34th episode, so I've
Hooray!
I've rehearsed it. Also, real quickly, while we're waiting for questions to roll in, Evolve on Steam charts, just to look it up because it always makes me sad. Its average players for the last 30 days was 236.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's so low.
And that's actually been dropping still. I think that there was a spike in December around the Steam sale, but even in December, the peak players only got to 1,500. And then in September was when it had a free weekend. And that's the crazy thing to me is it was at 447 in August. Then it had a free weekend in September and tripled. And then when it came back in October, it was lower than when it was in August. So it's just like people were not sticking around in that game. So let's see what you guys have to say for us today. Zakita asks, how you doing today?
Yeah,
I think we're doing well.
pretty well.
Yeah.
There's a garbage truck that comes by my house every night at about 5 a.m.
Oh, God.
So that's a thing, and I'm dealing with that. I'm trying to figure out how to file a noise complaint. If anybody has any experience with filing noise complaints with their local government, I'd love to hear about it. But
You should just get really loud too, and then when someone files a noise complaint against you, ask them how they did it.
the thing is, like,
Just trace it back.
It's like reverse engineering the political system.
Yeah, and this is really a weird modern. I won't dig into this too much because it's not game related. But like my first instinct when I woke up at 5 a.m. because I was frustrated and I like had no agency. I couldn't like tell this person to not pick up the garbage loudly because it just happens every day in San Francisco. But I was like, oh, I'm going to Google this and see if other people have experienced this issue. And they definitely have. And like our garbage company here is like their Yelp reviews had been bombed. And somebody captured this YouTube video, this like, night vision YouTube video of them experiencing the same thing like 3 years ago. So I was like, oh, cool, solidarity. But also I'm pissed off.
Well, here's something to make you a little happier. Simblor says, not a question, but it's good to see you back, Evan.
Oh, thanks.
So, there you go. Let's see. Varendil asks, if you could put 2 games together to make a super game, what would they be? I'd love a Civ crossed with SimCity style game. That'd be interesting.
This question is totally like a NeoGAF thread. it is the essence of NeoGAF thread. I don't say that in any kind of critical way. It's a good question. It's a fun question.
I'm going to say, well, you guys are thinking, I'm going to say Spore mixed with any good game.
Ooh.
That's not fair.
Is that cheating?
Spore mixed with Fallout. Okay.
Yeah, I do Spore mixed with some sort of strategy or builder game because I thought that was the part of Spore that was lacking the most. So
Okay.
I do like Spore with like Galciv or something.
Great. Steven?
Man, off the top of my head, I don't know. For a while there, I've been like, what would be cool is a game like Stardew Valley, so kind of like a Harvest Moon game, but set in the apocalypse. So like The Last of Us meets Stardew Valley. That would be my choice.
Oh my God.
A game that's like optimistic, even though things are just going to hell all
That's
around
cool.
you.
Would anything
A bit of
grow?
farming sim. Yeah, that would be like part of the struggle though. Like instead of like summer tornadoes or whatever they have in those games, it would be like summer acid rain and people would die. I don't know.
That's actually a pretty cool idea. Yeah.
So
I'm glad. I'm gonna start making it.
this is kind of a dumb combination, but I just want the Star Trek license to get the EVE Online treatment. I mean, we have Star Trek Online.
No.
I was going to say, Steven, as our resident MMO expert, I'm not sure what your feelings are on Star Trek Online.
Stay away.
I did put some time in it. I thought that the ship combat was, had something going for it, but I mean, Star Trek, I think just really, I'm a big fan. Like, it just lends itself to that kind of open philosophy that EVE has, where the players decide, what transpires in this like ever evolving story on a single server, and we already hear about the political machinations on EVE Online like every other month. I just love instead of like this user-made clan, why not the Cardassians?
So would you be able to pick like if you wanted to be like human or Klingon or?
Oh, absolutely.
So what you're saying is you want to add race wars to EVE?
Well, I mean, if you've watched if you watch Deep Space Nine, there's like a lot of intense like spying and subterfuge.
Yeah.
Even in TNG, there's stuff with the Romulans where. Like Riker is disguising himself as a Romulan, and I think Deanna Troi in one episode, or a Klingon or something. I can't remember. So I just think there's a lot of opportunity there for that kind of game.
So I'm going to real quickly end this question by saying there's a guy on my friends list on Steam who I do not know. I added him during one of our community TF2 streams a while back, who is on Star Trek Online most nights.
Amazing.
And I don't know why. I'm not judging. Apparently, they're having fun with it. But yeah, they're dedicated, man. This far out. I think there are probably more people playing Star Trek Online than there are people playing Evolve. So we got to give it that.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's depressing.
I mean, like any big franchise, Star Trek has a lot of hardcore fans, and they're just gonna, they want to be immersed in that universe, and I totally respect that.
Yeah, I don't think that game is terrible. It's just. It's why it does deserve recognition though, because so many MMOs are like fascinated with only letting you play beautiful people. Very rarely do they give you like the reins to make truly ugly characters. And Star Trek Online, like some of the races you can play as, I'm not as familiar with it, but some of them are just like nightmare fuel. So it's great.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wake asks, did you guys talk about Lawbreakers changing from free-to-play to buy-to-play yet? We did not. That was actually a panel that I was at GDC.
Yeah.
I saw Cliff Blazinski and the Boss Key team talking about Lawbreakers. I think it's an interesting change. I really like their reasoning for it. Basically, they were saying that it was influencing design, and they didn't want it to. They were saying that while they're moving really quickly, and they're just like making a game that they want to make, and they kind of don't have any reins on them to do things that they don't want to do. And they decided to go free to play, and then while they were designing the game, it sounded like that was kind of coming up in design meetings of like, okay, what if we did this thing that let you, like, you know, you could buy or whatever. And the way that their artistic director put it was he was just like, we didn't want that to be there. We were focusing on, I think the quote he said is, we were focusing on how do we make money instead of how do we make a great game. And they just recognized it was a distraction and moved away. I think it's a good choice. Completely separate from whether it helps them actually sell the game or not. I think it's a good choice.
Yeah. I mean, that publisher Nexon. I mean, Nexon, I don't know. I don't want to say they have a bad reputation. They just sort of like aren't like a known big presence in the West yet. I mean, they made MapleStory, but they also published Dirty Bomb, you know, from Splash Damage. Those guys in the UK, which I really enjoyed. I thought it had a lot of interesting, like, it was like a super twitchy game. Like super low time to kill, interesting little weapon mechanics and you know, push cart stuff, but like interesting take on that too, and maps and modes. But that game should be a big lesson to them, because I'm not going to say it's a flop because I don't know that, and that's just speculation. But it certainly hasn't like sparked up to the top of the Steam charts.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
JBJ Blaze, our subscriber, this is one for you, Evan, asked, why do magazines release about 2 months prior to the month they are indicated for? That confuses me. As our editor-in-chief, I have to tell you, that also confuses me.
Yeah. I mean, we release 13 issues a year. I think that basically, that's part of it, but it's also, I mean, the real reason is that's the month that we want newsstands to say like that they hold the issue for, that they stands for. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a technique almost in a way, but also a way of signaling newsstands like, hey, keep this up here. It's our February issue, but we want it to stay up there, you know, into February essentially, even though it's coming out, you know, earlier than that.
Right. And those who are curious, yes, PC Gamer is not just a website. We are still a magazine as well, and you can find more about that at PCgamer.com.
It's a great magazine. We added some pages last year, which is awesome.
We got No Man's Sky on the cover coming up, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I love print. It's, you know, for one thing, it's super fun to craft stuff in print because you have the limitations of the page, and it's just a really fun group activity, I think. But also, I think it's just really fun to get something unexpected in the mail every month, and kind of, unlike the internet, you know, it's just like we're curating all that stuff for you and just throwing it at you. And I think most people's experience on the internet, it's like they're selecting, you know, do I want to read this? Do I want to read that? And like you're searching for something specific. So it's nice to curl up with some pages every once in a while.
Agreed.
Billy Bobble says, how hyped are you guys for Tekken 7 coming to PC?
That's cool. The PC needs more fighting games. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's terrific. I mean, especially with the loss of what was the company that just got bought by
Rising
Riot?
Thunder?
Yeah, Rising Thunder.
Yeah.
We were super excited about that, and
It's a bummer.
and we're speculating. I mean,
I cannot imagine that Riot is not making a fighting game right now.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll dive in this real quick. Tom, you had this amazing like theory and reaction, and like a light bulb just went off in my head, along with it just made total sense.
It was such a cheeky PR release, too. So those of you guys who don't know, Rising Thunder was this PC-only, kind of friendlier but still deep fighting game that was being
built
developed.
for being played on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And it was in alpha. You know, we did some good coverage of it. Tyler played it in a tournament, like did some great stuff on it. But like Seth Killian, who's from Capcom, worked on Street Fighter 4, and I don't think he worked on 5, but he was there for a while. Really respected name in that scene, helped make this game, but they shut it down after Riot bought that company.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, this promising like PC-specific fighting game just kind of vanished. But, you know, so when you think about the challenge that Riot faces as a company, like, you know, League of Legends, most popular game in the world, most people tell you that is not a mobile game. Where do they go from here? Like, where are they going to be in 5 years? You know, if you're thinking as a business and as a community. And, you know, as much as I'm sure League of Legends will still be being played, it may not be being played at that level. And there's certainly plenty of games still trying to, like, get in there. We talked about Paragon. There's going to be many more imitators and whatnot, and people building and iterating on those ideas, which is great. So how do you build another success at the level of League of Legends? That's an esport. That's a massive global phenomenon. Well, what if you just kind of license your game into another genre, right? So you're not you're not competing with yourself. You're not asking people like to play League of Legends 2, which would be strange, and you're not trying to sell people on something completely new, like that existing audience. You're not trying to get them into, a new licensed racing game or something that's just like really off the wall and could be doomed to failure. And you're sort of taking their existing enthusiasm for the characters that they've invested, hundreds of hours into or whatever, and maybe even like giving bonuses and incentives. I mean, it's basically the Zynga strategy in a way of, okay, you liked Farmville, how about Cityville? And how about these other similar games? I guess those are in the same genre, so to speak, but they're trying to transfer their player base as they go to kind of keep the company alive.
Yeah.
And I think it could be genuinely fun. Like, those characters are all very varied and different. They have a big roster to play with, so they can kind of pick and choose. And I think it would be really satisfying to sort of see those characters blown up to high fidelity. You know what I mean? In that perspective with like high res art. So.
I think that idea is fantastic, honestly. And like, you might be onto something there too, because the other interesting thing is they killed Rising Thunder, but Stonehearth is still coming out. So it wasn't like just, they bought this company and then just cleaned house and got rid of all their projects. They just specifically got rid of Rising Thunder. So you have to ask why. And yeah, like, it sounds like maybe they're paving the way for their own thing, and they just didn't want the Rising Thunder, because as a brand, Rising Thunder was really bland. You're playing as one generic robot versus another generic robot. Like, it wasn't, that game kind of had problems thematically, I guess you could say.
Hey, one of those generic robots was Russian, okay?
But here's some more evidence. I mean, what is Riot really good at right now? So competitive games, like fighting games, esports, lends themselves to fighting games, obviously, but still it's sort of like an untapped scene. I think, fighting games have a big scene. They have EVO, I guess, is the big tournament in Vegas every year, and that's really fun to watch. But it hasn't exploded worldwide. It doesn't have like hundreds of thousands of people watching these tournaments and big prizes and big teams. Skins and microtransactions, they know how to handle that. That lends itself to that type of game. Netcode is super important. Riot's always talking about, like, they're doing these talks about how they're like optimizing the internet to make things work perfectly across servers and stuff like that. So they have that infrastructure in place. It's a perfect fit. It's gonna happen.
Yeah,
I'm convinced.
Tyler is angrily typing in all caps in the chat right now, saying he was a Russian dog piloting a robot. I'm sorry, Tyler, but I agree. I think that it does. Okay, so here's the other thing I said earlier. It's the press release for when they got bought was so cheeky, because they were like, Stonehearth is still coming out, and then the paragraph about Rising Thunder was like, Rising Thunder is canceled, or is like, we're not going to be making Rising Thunder anymore, but we're working on a new project that we're really excited about and we can't tell you anything about. And it's like, oh, I wonder what in God's name that could be the moment you get bought by Riot. Like,
right.
Oh, this almost full game that you have made is now canceled suddenly, but you're still working on something in the background? Like, come on.
League of Legends Hyper Extreme Remix.
Yes. I'd actually be really okay with League of Legends being like the Nintendo of the PC and making like League of Legends Mario Kart and League of Legends fighting game and all that stuff.
That's a dark tunnel.
I know, and it's a tunnel I am happily going down.
We need a good kart racer.
Amiibo.
Yes, League of Legends Amiibo. That's what the PC
your
is
character
missing.
on the thing, and then take it over to your friend's house and load up your League of Legends character with all his runes and stuff. Oh,
dude, this is great.
Idea.
Wait,
don't put these ideas in their head. They're probably listening to this, like taking down notes.
Steven, this is gold, man.
Next.
We should have brought you on the show before.
Next question.
Stop it! You're gonna make me blush.
Actually, we're out of time now. But I do want to thank everyone for watching. I want to especially thank Steven Mesner for joining us. It's been great to have you on.
Bye, friends.
And hopefully we'll get you on sometime again soon.
Yeah,
as well.
I would love to.
I would have him back. If you were a fan of Mr. Mesner as well, please let us know in the comments of this post on pcgamer.com/podcast. The post will be up later today. Once again, also, if you are watching from Twitch, please give us a follow, or if you really love us, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe there as well. Leave comments in the YouTube comments about whatever you liked or disliked about the show. And if you're listening on iTunes, give us a review if you like the show. We really appreciate it. It helps us out. And always, we follow your feedback. Our Twitters are down there if you want to talk to us.
We also accept yak milk, pots and pans, lightly used.
It's a barter system.
Firstborn children.
Oh, definitely that. Yeah.
50 caliber ammunition.
All of those things.
It's all appreciated, guys.
I will be out from the show, unfortunately, for the next 2 weeks. But I will be back from there, and the show will be in the competent and warm, loving hands of Evan and James and the rest of the PC Gamer crew.
I don't know about that.
Maybe. I hope. But we will see you then next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific time, right here on twitch.tv/PCGamer. Thanks very much, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Bye.